of this act of violence. So why that passivity? So they also have reached that level, that very high level of no turning back, but they're not engaging actively in the act of violence, whereas very passively they are engaging in this act of violence. This is another example again from today's newspaper. This is a disagreement regarding a land where it was believed that it belonged to a particular community that had built a temple, and now different structure is there. And what I've underlined will show the example of the disagreement. The collector, he believes that this is a place that is marked by the archaeology, by the ASI, as a mosque, as you can see in this article. Whereas there are other communities which are saying that it is not. Again, there is no disagreement. So you will find this kind of model of disagreement related to religious places happening in many parts of our country. Slowly, many places are coming up. So since we've already set up the procedure, you will find that every other place where this kind of have dialogue intervention at this stage itself, it will not lead to violent conflict. Then we come to riots. At the example of the riots that are happening in the UK,
Excuse me, there's a lot of disturbance. Ilakya Sendil can please put off her mic. Ilakya Sendil. Yes, thank you.
yes, thank you, ma'am. So here in the UK, you will find that there is a clash between the far right wing and the others. And what was the starting point of this? One of the reasons, the riots triggered by false line posts wrongly identifying the suspected killer of three young girls in a July 2019 So there is an incident that had happened, and false information or false narrative was created about that incident, and that sparked all the fire and burning that's happening. And further down, if you see the portion that I've highlighted, any suggestion they are patriots or they've got a cause is nonsense. They are criminals. So the authorities, they believe that these people who are rioting are mere criminals, whereas the ones who are rioting, involved in these activities, they believe they are patriots. See the idea or the perspective that each group is having towards whatever they are doing, right? So there again you have a disagreement in their ideologies, in their principles, in whom they want to stay in the country, and so on, who are people who belong to that particular place, and that has led to, or that has escalated to this form of violence. But they are clearly saying they are not patriots. Now if you look at another interesting article, this is the Directorate of School Education, Chandigarh, has issued instructions to all education officers at district and block levels, principals and headmasters to replace good morning with Jai Hind. So from August 15, they're not going to use good morning at all. They're only going to use Jai Hind. Why? To inculcate a deep sense of patriotism and national pride in students. So look at the perspective here. In the previous context, we saw that the authorities are saying they're not patriots. All right, they are criminals. But here we are seeing if you use this is to promote patriotism. It seems good if you try to understand it in a deeper way. We have to think of what is it going to lead to. Right, if someone forgets, for instance, as a student who simply forgets to say this, right, just out of practice, a faculty or someone says good morning, how is it going to impact this particular new rule that they have introduced? We have to think of at that level. So what will happen then? A disagreement will begin. Some group will say it's just good morning, it's just a wish. Some group will say no, if you don't say that, you're anti-Indian, you're anti-national, and so on. So that disagreement, if it's just brewing, it's a brewing stage, and when it escalates, you will find it will end in violent conflicts which are beginning in schools. Remember the first example I gave, where there is a lot of conflicts happening within schools, and if you introduce situations like this, we do not know how the outcome will be. We can only predict this could happen. Yes, so this is the same article. Now coming back to this idea of patriotism and so on, the same idea I'm explaining to you about disagreement. We go back in time, all right, to a person called Richard Wagner. He was a German musician. And these are his ideas about the Jewish people. He's basically anti-Semitic. He's against Jewish people. He hates Jewish people, and you'll find a lot of his hatred expressed through his music and through his writings and so on. So what I've put in quotes is what he has said exactly about the Jewish people. Every non-Jew is viscerally repulsed by Jewish people. That is to say, you can't even stand looking at their face. So the hatred is so deep that you can't even look at the face of the person. You begin to hate the person just with the outward appearance. Okay, and their speech. Then next he talks about their speech. The way they talk is outlandish, unpleasant. So he hates the way they speak. He hates the way they look, and he feels they don't have a culture. So this, along with this nationalistic feeling, so there are a lot of understandings of nationalism, but in this context, it is his feeling that his nation is better than the others, especially in the context of the Jewish people. So how does it impact another person whom we know in history, Hitler? This is again his quote from his book. I recognize in Wagner my only predecessor. I regard him as a supreme prophetic figure. And we all know that Wagner and his work of art, especially his music, it has impacted a lot of people, especially Hitler. If you read through some of uh, his past, as what has influenced him, what has made him like this, you will find Wagner's name surfacing in many of the works. So a person who is engaged in a work of art today, now in this presentation, we are looking at art as a very powerful intervention, as a tool to create dialogue, to initiate dialogue, to bring about the peace process between different communities. But you can also see the other example, the other extreme, that art has potential to do, to destroy a person. So here is the disagreement. What was the disagreement? That Jewish people, he hates the Jewish people, and that hatred is passed on to Hitler. And then furthermore, we find that he was rejected. Hitler was rejected from this place. This is the Academy of Fine Arts at Vienna. He wanted to become an artist. He wanted to become painter. He loved to paint and so on, but he failed the entrance exam, and that's the reason why he wasn't accepted in this academy. And that is a place, that's the first rejection. And this is a place that inspired him. I told you about Wagner, right? So in one of the musical presentations, orchestras that he attended, he came back with this revived interest in nationalism, national pride, and so on. So the point is, disagreements will always be there. If we do not have a dialogue there, we do not have the cultural intervention, the artistic interventions there, the disagreements will remain in that manner. And it will just take an event or an incident to spark that fervor, what we call as a national pride, nationalism, that will spark it, and things will go haywire after that, as it happens in the life of Hitler as well. So what happens in his life? He becomes a chancellor through these years, May 1940 through January 1945, and this is the outcome. 6 million Jews. Okay, we all know the story. 6 million Jews as a result of this. Now, when this was happening, on the one part of the world, you find that people are dying, there's genocide going on. At the same time, in this particular shelter, not exactly this, is just a sample I took. Imagine a shelter like this. It's an air raid shelter, a broken down place like this. It doesn't look very attractive at all. But who gather here? There are 7 to 13-year-old children. Kids are gathering here, and they are German and Swiss kids. Two different nationalities. Their parents are fighting out there. So their parents hate each other out there, but here the children are come together. And what do? They started to imagine. They started to create stories. So they convert this place into a magic underworld. They start painting, they start coloring, they start making toys, they start making puppets and telling stories. Like kids, right? They are full of imagination and curiosity, and they convert this space, okay, into a place where they are enjoying and living their life, what they understand about the life they are living. So thus you find it is through a dialogue. A dialogue, maybe they're not talking. Do they know that their parents are fighting out there? Do they know people are dying out there? They would know. But then what they talk about, what they actually communicate, will not be that language. It's through the language of art. And through this, they are able to create their own safe space, a space where they are engaged in a lot of storytelling, and that's a pastime for them. But yet, you can find a possibility of this amidst all the chaos and violence and conflict that is taking place, and that is art. Okay, and that's why we are here learning about this. So, the point is, there harm can be done, like in the life of Hitler. What did he do with all of the bitterness in his life? Harm can be done. Okay, so on the other hand, healing is also possible. So if one chooses to, or if one is led to, they can create harm in the society. On the other hand, healing can also take place. So it depends. It depends on what language we use. Hitler's life, he used a language of bitterness. Again, if you read through some of his history, they state that he had a very abusive father. Whatever reasons, it will not justify, obviously, what he did to the society, to the community of Jewish people. It will not justify. But if you look at the bitterness in his life, very abusive father, he lost his brother. They say he became very withdrawn the moment his brother died. And the moment his mother died, because the mother would go and shelter him physically. When his father came and tried to beat him up, so when his mother passed away, he felt even more withdrawn, and he felt that was a complete transformation for him. Then he was a failure when he tried to pursue his dreams. And there's one part where he also had fallen in love with, ironically, a Jewish girl, and she had probably rejected him, and so on. So you will find a lot of bitterness in his life. Absolutely no love, no experience of people loving him, and the kids also have gone through, maybe not to the same intensity, but for their level, they are kids, right? They have definitely gone through same abusive system. Why is it an abusive system? It doesn't give them the protection that they need. They would have witnessed death of their loved ones, and their childhood is robbed now. As you know, during that time, the children were sent to safe houses. Probably they also felt rejection and everything, but in this context, in their childhood, they are making use of the language that they know to just have fun, which is creating a healing process in their mind. So, the point here, the central idea through which I will take you through this entire remaining presentation is this: dialogue is possible. So, when it comes to intercultural dialogue, first we have to start to believe that dialogue is possible, intervention is possible at any stage. So, the last part of the introduction is about the concept of conflict escalation. Now, this is a very interesting concept introduced by the Danish Center for Conflict Resolution. As you can see, it all starts with a disagreement, meaning we see things differently. So when we are at this level, this is the first level, starting level. We are seeing things differently. It happens in homes, it happens among our friends, it happens in college, schools, everywhere. Where there are two people, there's always a disagreement. Okay, that is how dynamic we are. That's how we are made. We are not like robots, right? We're not like gadgets. You have a gadget, you have software, the same is installed everywhere, it works in the same way. Or we're not machines, right? So we go through a lot of life experiences which mold us in different way, and for one problem, two people will have 10 different solutions. That's how people are. So it begins with disagreement. We see things differently. So if dialogue is introduced at this stage, it will be resolved. As we go further up, we will find that uh, the steps are narrowing, which means the potential for this conflict to be resolved is getting narrower and narrower as we go higher. But at the same time, at every stage, there's always some form of dialogue that is possible, as we'll see some examples. So the second will be the personification stage, where we blame the other person. This is all your fault. If anything wrong happens, you're organizing some event, and there is some issue there because we already had a disagreement. If there is an issue, then we start blaming. Then goes to the next level. The problem expands. So when there are further issues, see this. I don't want to go into deeply into this because there are a lot of other things that I have to explain. But each point you can understand with certain examples from our own lives. The third is, this is not the first time. You're doing this every time. You have heard a lot of this from the people who are our authorities, right? The first time we do something, and then, okay, when we repeat it, we're kind of blamed all the time. So from that it goes to the next level, and as you can see from from that level where the problem expands, and when it goes to that next level where dialogue is abandoned, there is a red line which I have marked with that arrow. What does that mean? That is a danger zone where communication stops. Why does it stop? What's the use? So we come to that level where we think, what is the use of talking to this person? Now you can go back and think in our own lives, okay, wherever we are, whatever context we are, have we reached that stage with any person, maybe an individual or in a group or in an institution or anywhere? Have we reached that stage where dialogue is abandoned? It's a danger zone, okay, because we have started to believe dialogue is not possible, but here we are looking at how dialogue is possible at every stage, because what happens after this, it goes to that enemy image, which is no good. So how did we come to that level of concluding that a human being, just you're like yourself, to say that they're no good, which means they will also say the same things about us. They will also think that we are no good. But are we no good? We know that there's a lot of potential of goodness in us with all the weaknesses that we have, but somehow we concluded about that person. No good, that person is no good. And then further on, open hostility. So this is where UK and places where you have violence, in different parts, and any kind of violent activity, you will find they have reached this level of open hostility. The example that we saw in UP, where that man kills the sister, and the school children taking the knife, all these are examples of open hostility. The end justifies the means. So because it is justified, remember in that context where the brothers killing the sister, not only that man, the society also believes, right, what he's doing is right, because probably this woman would have done this. So that idea is there in their mind, and all of those people who are just taking the video, for all of them, they would probably have crossed the stage of what is the use? What is the use of telling people this is what they repeatedly do? They choose whomever they want to marry or to be with, and this is how the younger generation is, and they have come to a conclusion, what is the use, right? And all of the problems we have with generation gap, it reaches when it crosses this line, what is the use? Then what happens? We find that there will be a lot of problems in their life, and when we leave young people at that zone where they have reached a place where they don't have anyone to trust or talk to, it is bad for them, because they're going to make further and further wrong choices in their life without having anyone to trust and talk to about it. And then finally, polarization. Let's get away from here. It's done and dusted. The relationship is gone. So this is the model of conflict escalation, and the idea is, what do we understand from this model, or what is our takeaway from this? Our takeaway is, when there is disagreement, even a slight disagreement, it need not be with words, it can just be with expressions. An eye roll it's supposed to be a very powerful clue for you to understand that the person has contempt towards the other person. When you're trying to explain a point and then they do this eye roll, that's a powerful clue. So body language or through any of the clues, if you sense there is disagreement, if intervention begins at that stage, everything else will be sorted out. It is not easy, but if it's not done at this stage, then it goes on. But the point is, there's always hope at every stage, even if it crosses the danger line. That's what we are going to see further. Okay. So what does art do? So art is a language that makes this dialogue possible. Because if you look at language itself, Lacan says it belongs to that symbolic realm. So it restricts us. The moment the child starts speaking, it has come to that symbolic stage. So whatever is deep inside, in the subconscious, sometimes language fails in trying to communicate that. And that is where art steps in. So it helps us to understand and reflect on the violence. It generates a healing process. It invites moments of grace and reflection and forgiveness. What the process, the artistic process, it can be a project. Through a project, you're inviting them to a work of art, to create a sculpture, to paint, or to have to read poems, or to sing and to dance. Many cultures have their own ways of their own rituals of healing and recovery and so on. So this is possible through the language of art, and it is to reflect without reproducing the violence. That is very important. If you look at this model, beyond a point, there's no scope for them to be together. But if you look at places like Manipur, where they are rebuilding the society, very recently there's one community or one example of two communities coming together and signing a peace treaty. So that's happening in one part. So looking at that model, probably other communities also will resolve all the conflicting situations. Now it doesn't end there. When we try to understand peace, peace doesn't end. Peace is always something that we are moving towards, right? Because when there is reconciliation that has happened in a community, there is always a potential for people to go back and reflect on what has happened and try to revive those emotions associated with the violent acts and then to reproduce the violence. So the blame will never stop then. And as a society, we will self destruct if we allow this to continuously happen in our society. If we constantly blame the past mistakes for what is happening now in the present, whatever community it is or whatever had happened, on the one hand, we need to bring it back into the narrative and resolve it and stop with that and then move further, okay, without reproducing the violence. But if that is used as an alibi to continue violent activities, then we will destruct ourselves as a society. Okay, so it is a language, a very beautiful language of intercultural dialogue. So let me go with a few examples that I'm giving. Only the intensity of the conflict here will grow only further. Okay, so because it starts with the classroom. So I've divided this into three sections. First, how do we have some activity that will promote the dialogue within the classroom, and then we go from the classroom to the community, then then to the community itself. So first, let's look at promoting dialogue in the classroom. So I've taken some of this idea from Elise Boulding. She's written this work, The Underside of History, a View of Women Through Time. She's considered as a matriarch of peace studies. And in one of her speeches, she has said that the learning process of culture of peace should be fun and creative. Okay, what is fun and creative? Art can be fun and creative. Art can also be something that will disturb those who are in their comfort zone, make them think and make them do something about what is going on, the problems in society. But here there is a focus also on the fun part of art, to be fun and to be very creative. So that's going to be the focus when it comes to the classroom activities. So I would like to call this a dialogue continuum of the six petals of peace, a classroom model. So, what is the scope here? We're trying to engage students to dialogue, to come out with their ideas, to share their stories, in other words. So, as I said, when it comes to asking in a context, and especially in today's classroom context, if we just like that gather students together and ask them, okay, what is a problem? Sometimes some of them might share, some of them might not share. So this is something that I had tried in the classroom. So what you can see here is a representation of the six petals of peace. So let me explain to you what exactly was done. So each petal was given a theme, was written on that particular chart, which is shaped like a petal of a flower. So in this chart, for example, the theme is conflict. So the instruction given to the class was divided into six groups because there are six petals of peace. So each group is given a particular theme. This group was given conflict, and they were asked to share their stories with that particular group and then to write it in that particular chart. So you will find all of them had an opportunity to share their story. So this is a beginning of a dialogue, right? It doesn't stop here once all of them had written. Let me read some of the examples. So, for example, one child had written, I had a conflict between the group of another class for holding program for teacher's birthday. So they are young people, they've just come from their school. So for them, this is a conflicting situation. Then they used my name in the conversation among the group, but I didn't understand because they speak a different language. Also, when I asked, they wouldn't respond. So these are nuances of what's happening in the life of a child in a classroom. Now, we look at all the other things that might trouble a child. We're looking at the problem that they have with the overuse of laptop or gaming or mobile and substance abuses and so on. But where all of these things begin are these small incidents that happens in their life. So So, and do they come and share all this, or when they go home, do they really share all this with whoever they are with, whatever social context they are with? Do they have time to share? And when at a particular point, if you look at how they talk, teenagers today, they really don't know how to have build a conversation, right? I have a teenage son, and at first, when you ask him how was the day, what was the school, all will be very positive. But you give a lot of time and space, only then he will sit and tell everything that had happened. So this is a space that is given for them to share even the small things that would have affected their life. So another group was given equality, and some examples. We speak in Tamil. For them, equality is this. Right? For us, equality, we think about in a grand scheme of things. For them, if we speak in Tamil, means some people are seeing us in an awkward way. But if we speak in a different language, they think that we are educated and rich. The mind of a student. This is what they are going through. And another example, when people are dark or bad figure shape, the society thinks they're not educated, they are poor. But when they are fair, they think that we are very rich. So for them, this is inequality that they face based on the appearance, the color of their skin. So the next one was respect. So in respect, a few examples. During my 10th grade, I forgot to bring my notebook for one of my classes. The teacher shouted at me and asked me if I lacked common sense, called me stupid in front of the class, and threw my book. And it made me feel very disrespectful. So the child is remembering this. The teacher would have done a lot of things, but what remains in the mind of the child is this incident. Another one example, while the teacher was writing notes on the board, I couldn't see what was written. I asked my friend to read. The teacher saw, and she simply started shouting and threw my book on the floor, got angry without even listening to our side. So when it comes to conflict, for their age, for what they have experienced, is what they feel is conflict. And another group was given violation of rights. And I'm just reading a few examples for one of time. Seniors forcing juniors to cut their forearm and drink alcohol. Now this is not college, this had happened in their school. So I was shocked to read this. So these are the kind of children who we engage with, on a daily basis. Each one having gone through, for them it is a trauma at their level, right? Then another one, a new student not allowed to introduce himself to the class because of his voice, which sounded like a rat. Okay, very strange. Because of the voice, the student was not given. For them, this is violation of rights. So again, where this is a space that they have been given to share their stories, and they have been able to share it. Then conflict with the environment. So when I gave this topic, I was wondering what are they going to write. Conflict with the environment and the usual things, don't cut trees or keep the roads clean or pollution and so on. We will find these things are affecting the students as well. During rainy days, electric post was crashing on the tree and power comes and goes. So that this is a basic problem for students. So they were able to assess this or select this, identify this as a problem, conflict with the environment. And then my neighbor had a piggery farm, and the farm was clean and good, but when the waste comes, it's not properly utilized, it smells outside, creating diseases and so on. So again, when you look at their problems, it is at a very small level. We usually look at things at a street level or as a locality and so on, but you'll find how deeply each problem is impacting the students. And the last one is inner peace. And strangely, when I gave this to another class, uh, they had titled it as inner peace is a myth. I was shocked to read this. Okay, so I was just wondering, is this what our generation are going through? Are they believing there is no peace at all? There is no scope at all, right? So that not I had added there. Inner peace is not a myth. I had added it there, and I gave it to this class. And also, just for your information, this activity was done with two classes. Okay, and that is something that I tried for the first time. And whatever you're seeing now is by one class, that is younger level students, and then I'll tell you what happens after that. So this inner peace, you will find for them, it's they're a little bit afraid of initiation, and they used to forget songs and facts, and it is affecting the concentration, so they don't have inner peace, right? So we might think only if a person is struggling with a lot of problems, they don't have inner peace, but for their level, this small thing is affecting them and making them peaceless. and then have a social anxiety. Many of our students struggle with the social anxiety. They're not able to mingle with people, not able to talk to people. They feel like an outsider. That is making them not to have inner peace. Right. So these are collections of stories or experiences from one particular class. So what was done? Their names were not given. So the same was given to the senior level students of peace studies. Okay, we take a paper, conflict, trauma, and peace literature. So, as a part of their activity in making them understand concepts of trauma and peace and conflict, I've given the same chart, the reverse side of the chart, the other side of the chart, and this is what they had come up with. I'm not going to explain what they had done, but this is just a sample to show how you create a kind of a dialogue between generations. Okay, you have an activity and approach where you make them express themselves. That's the whole point of using the art approach. Art refers to any kind of work. So here the artistic work would be craft. You're just making a craft over there and you're designing something in a particular way. So this is the outcome of that. So what they had done, the words that are highlighted in the pink color: equality, inner peace, conflict with environment, violation of rights, respect, are simplification of the actual six petals of peace. So the simplified theme was given to the younger group, and the more experienced group, they were given the actual six petals of peace: living with justice and compassion, cultivating inner peace, dismantling the culture of war, living in harmony with the earth, promoting human rights and responsibilities, and the importance of culture of respect. So this was given, and this is the outcome. Right, each one had designed it in a very creative way. So why is it a continuum? You have one class that is giving the problem. So the younger class. So the experienced class, they read through all of that and then they were asked to discuss in their groups. Again, the senior class was divided into six groups and they were asked to come up with a solution for each of these problems and they presented that in the class. So each of them took this petal and they started narrating the story and telling what could be the probable solution. So, this is at the classroom level, a classroom engagement where we are creating a space where there is a dialogue that is possible. Now, the activity doesn't stop here. They will be continue to come up with a sort of a presentation that will include, that's not yet done, but this is what they will be expected to further, to have a dance, a song, and poetry or anything, whatever they are creative at, to bring a kind of a solution to each of these problems. So there'll be like six group presentations that will address these issues at their level, right? So let's go on to the next one. There's two more and I'll quickly finish. The next is intercultural dialogue via celebrating differences. This is from the classroom to the community. So there are these are two classrooms that are engaged in this activity. Next is the entire college community engaged in understanding the different concepts of peace through cultural activities. All right. So this again was a part of a project, a peace project that I had that was given to me, that I had got sponsored by the United Board, and the title of this festival was Shalom Fest 2019. Right, the theme was to celebrate differences. So if you look at this, it was from 16th to 21st of November, and it was a celebration throughout the week. It culminated with 21st November, a celebration of it's the International Day of Peace, where they celebrated the Day of Peace, and these are some of the activities that students were engaged in: clean drive, street play, face painting, discussions, exhibition, photography, short film competition, painting, poster making, and all of this. And how many participated? If you can look at the number, 748 participants benefited from this. So every day, one theme was selected. Now, this was suggested by people who were engaged, who were peace builders around the world. We had invited them for the workshop, and they had suggested in creating this kind of a model for us. So, first it began with respecting nature, then we went on to celebrating non-violence, third, celebrating gender fluidity and inclusion, the fourth day, it was envisioning the future, and finally, celebrating culture. And these are some of the just snippets of that. This was the first day where we celebrated a clean drive, relationship with the environment. So we had a lot of people. I think it was around 600 students participated in the clean drive. We had a street play. Some events you had participation was very less. Okay, and then this is one Miss Revati. She's a transgender, and for this the entire classroom was full, and many students from various departments participated in this. And in this photo that I'm pointing out here, you can see this is a student, the one who's standing in between these two resource persons. That's a student. She is also a transgender, and she also faced a lot of issues to deal with her identity and trying to communicate all this to whoever she was relating with and he was relating with. So this is on gender fluidity. And then we had an exhibition on peace community. Envisioning the future was a theme. So we gave them the topic of creating a peace community for the future, and this was their involvement. And another major aspect of this project was students undertaking field visit. We selected certain places, certain districts in Tamil Nadu, and we took some of these students. A few of them went, visited the communities, and spoke to them about the peace-related rituals or practices which were still going on, and also collected some of these folk songs, which some of them were related to peace, some of them were random folk songs which were there in their cultural memory. So what are we doing here? We are taking the students outside the classroom, trying to engage them in the college community, and then taking them beyond the college to the community to see the relationship that the world has with the society, with the different villages have it within their community, and to understand the conflicts that they'd had in the past and how they had dealt with this. So this will give them an understanding of how the communities deal with conflicting situations. So where is the creativity here? Where is the cultural dialogue or cultural engagement here? Again, it is through all the various activities they are engaged in. All right. So now we come to the last part, and in this part we look at more deeper examples of how, in violent conflicting situations, the arts approach has enabled communities in healing and reconciliation. So this is intercultural dialogue for healing and reconciliation. This is a community model. So we're going to see some examples from the world. Because we might wonder from seeing these classroom examples, what are they doing? They're just singing and dancing and they're making some things and presenting it. The real world is not that simple. The real world, you find people being hurt in a deeper way, people losing their family members, their houses being burned, like it's happening around the world today. So let's see some examples. Okay, so this particular woman, she lost her father and her three brothers in the Rwanda genocide. So I'm going to give example from two examples from a community in Brazil and Rwanda. So she lost her father and her three brothers. All right. Let's look at the next example. Now, this person, her house was burned down. She was attacked, and thankfully she escaped from that place, but she lost all her possessions. This is a third example. Her husband was killed, and then they came back for the sons, killed them. Again, the next day, they came back for the daughters, killed them, and left them in a particular place from which she wasn't able to take their bodies from that place. She had to bury them in that place itself. So here is another person. The last example, all of her children were killed. Okay, so here are women who have basically lost everything in their life due to the violence in Rwanda. Just a few examples. We know that it's a genocide, all right? Now, the question is forgiveness and reconciliation possible? Right? So, we are talking a lot in a safe space, right? The classroom is by and large a safe space. The college community, again, a safe space. But once you move outside, this is a reality, right? Sometimes a home can be a place that is not very safe. So is forgiveness and reconciliation possible, right? So what happened in Rwanda, about the genocide in Rwanda, it happened from April to the June 1994. Nearly 800,000 Rwandans were slaughtered, and the Tutsi group was targeted. So this is basically a conflict between two different cultural groups, Hutus and the Tutsis. Okay, so the examples of these women, they're all belonging to the Tutsi group. So the first thing that they had done after the genocide was over, see, it's a whole community that is in pain. Okay, they've lost everything. So how do they move on? So you can think of Manipur as an example as well. And what has happened in Wayanad, for example, it's a natural disaster. It is living in harmony with the earth. It comes under that particular theme. So how do they move on from that, from this natural disaster? So they had created this particular place called Garden of Memories. It was a remedy against the amnesia, not to forget what had happened in the past, but to remember it in a right way. So, what is this Garden of Memories, or why was it created? It is to question the spectator. You know, even if I read about it and look at these pictures, to imagine that is very moving and very, very painful. So, it is a space of memory for those people who had lost their loved ones, for us who have no connection with that, who might just watch it through pictures in the internet, it affects us as well. We are the spectators from a great distance. And for them, it's a mourning process for the entire nation. So, what is the art approach doing here? What's the dialogue here? It's a dialogue without the actual dialogue. Now, dialogue doesn't mean like I'm constantly speaking from the beginning of this presentation. That isn't dialogue. Sometimes the best dialogue is just to keep silent, and we all know that, right? When we go to a house where there is bereavement, we don't go and keep talking there. We sit quietly because we don't have words to even say, sometimes words to comfort them. We are at a loss for words in some context. So this is a mourning process for the entire nation. And it has stones. So let me show you pictures of this is how it looks like. It is basically a garden made of stones. And each stone has a name of the victim. And the people who have lost, their loved ones, they write the name on the stone and they just keep it over there. And these are pictures of the ritual that's happened. Sorry, when this garden was opened, and this is how it looks like. So as you can see, it is just a place full of stones, but for them it's not just a place full of stone. Each is a memory of what they had lost. So this is how and what is the artistic approach here? The stone, it's all designed, right? Many artists together have come and designed something like this. And it takes the place that language probably should try to accomplish in terms of comforting, in terms of bringing them positive memories about them, and so on. Language fails sometimes, right? One was grieving. So, this approach helps in reconciling all of that, whatever things they're not able to express, right? So, the approach of dialogue here is a community participation. What is this intercultural dialogue, and how do we implement that? Right, you can have your creativity, you can be very innovative, you can think, oh, I can do this, I can do that for the community, because we have that nature in us, right, where we want to help some community. That there's always that, it's a human nature as well. But how do we do that? So it isn't enough if we have that in our heart. Okay, we want to do something. Oh yes, we are creative, we have all these ideas, but what is most important is to engage the entire community, right? So that's where it starts. So the bottom up approach here is very important. You don't just go walk into a village that is grieving and saying, okay, we're going to bring peace, we're going to talk about peace and so on. It doesn't now have some cultural events. No, it is a process. So for all of this, it would have taken a lot of intervention, lot of dialogue. Now that is real conversations, and conversations that are having between the participants, between the many stakeholders, between the victims, I mean the survivors, and the artists, and so on. And the scope is to rebuild the social tissue. What is this? Rebuilding the social tissue. It is ripped apart, right? The moment a loved one dies, it's a trauma that they have gone through. So it's to rebuild the society, not as just individuals, but also as a community, to give them that feeling of community, which will heal them, and which will at least give them some kind of a peace at the presence where they feel that vacuum, that emptiness, that they don't have their loved ones. They would at least think, okay, we have the community with us, no matter what. So this is a dialogue between the survivors, the Rwandans, and the foreign artists as well. So they have engaged other people who are not from Rwanda, but it shouldn't be this way, that only other people, if there's a project, for example, some government is sponsoring a project and so on, and they go to the village and they implement this, it doesn't work that way. They have to engage with the community. So, foreign artists, along with the people who are in the locality. Also, the scope is to dignify the survivors by respecting the survivors, the victims, the people who had died, and to have reconciliation. So, this is the approach of the dialogue method. So, the first example that I gave from Rwanda is the Garden of Stones. All right. The next example again from Rwanda is the Upright Men Project. So here they had, can you see in that building, you find two figures here. Literally, it is upright men, two figures of two tall men, right? So this is kept in different buildings in that particular place. This is called the Upright Men Project. So they are 6 to 8 meters high painted figures or silhouettes of people. It might again seem very simple or insignificant from our perspective. What have they done? Just created great images, right? But it is to give presence to those victims. Again, it is connecting them with the people that they have lost and to go through that process of grief. And another reason is to restore their individuality. So, on the one hand, as a community, you are suffering, right? But at the same time, as an individual, also one has to come to terms with their loss and to identify themselves as a powerful member of that community. Both are essential. You know, in peace building, when you talk about a community, it shouldn't be in two extremes. A community shouldn't be too individualistic, then it will be chaotic. It shouldn't be too community oriented alone, then the individual needs of the community will not be met. So that is why it restores their individuality and reaffirming their status within the community. Because any victim would feel there is a lot of shame associated with what they're going through, as well as grief. Okay, I've lost all this, but because of that, they feel dehumanized. The whole process of losing their loved ones or witnessing the trauma is also very dehumanizing. So, this project was to reaffirm their status. That's why they are upright men. They are figures that are standing tall to show that yes, we had faced that, but we are still standing tall. You cannot break our spirit, to show that the dehumanizing process of Rwandans has failed. So they tried their best to destroy them in whatever way, but no. We as a community have come together. We are in the process of healing and we will move forward. So this affirmation will restore their individuality and give them the strength to move on. And all these things, imagine someone is coming and preaching it, okay, in a language, using words, using language, you try to speak about this, it doesn't create a great impact. So here the dialogue is created just by this work of art. So that is where the arts approach and the dialogue that builds the community together, that heals, is very important. So here's another example. This is from Brazil. These two individuals, they had identified a community in Brazil. So this had a lot of conflicts, that is, they were engaged in a lot of violent acts, a lot of criminal acts, basically. So how do you approach a community and change them? Again, you can use language. You can go and talk to them. You can counsel them. You can tell them this is not good for you. These substances are not good for you. Education is good. And that's happening all the time. Right, people do that, right, giving advice and so on. But what do? They engage in an act of painting. So their art approach here is to just paint. They started with this thing that you can see here, building that is painted blue, and on top of that you have a boy that's holding a kite. So this is the first project that they were engaged in. Then you will find they started painting the streets as well. So here's another example. They started painting literally the streets. So their vision was to paint that entire place, all the mountain ranges there, all the buildings there, to paint it. So what happened? This transformed the community slowly. They started engaging in, or they started involving themselves, more and more community members. Instead of orienting themselves on other criminal activities, they started to engage in this activity. So this is a very small intervention method in a small space, but it has transformed the community slowly. Okay, so I'm going to conclude now. Again, coming to that question, remember I showed some of these survivors who had lost almost everything in their life. So the question is forgiveness and reconciliation possible? is forgiveness and reconciliation possible for them. So imagine there is this woman, for example, the one who had lost her husband, her brothers, the one who had killed the husband and brother, he's coming and asking, telling sorry. What would you do in that place? What would I do in that place? I can't imagine that. All right, we can't imagine what's to be done. But then this is the underlying thing. Dialogue is possible, right? This is the only thing that knits us together as a community. This is the only saving grace that the world has today. The world which is burning in different places today. Here's an example for that. So here is this woman standing with a man who has killed the father and three brothers. So you can see the man here. This man has killed this woman's father and three brothers. What, what is he saying? So this is what he's saying during that process of asking forgiveness. My conscience was not quiet, and when I would see her, I was very ashamed. After being trained about unity and reconciliation, I went to her house and asked for forgiveness. Then I shook her hand. So far, we are on good terms. So even in the this is a project again. It's called Portrait of Reconciliation. It's an outcome of a government project. All right. So here you stand the survivor and the perpetrator together in a single frame. But as you can see, there's a lot of pain in both their faces. This is not something that they are told to act. You can't act this kind of a pain and trauma, right? Both the level of the victim as well as the perpetrator. Perpetrator, when they come to realize the implication of what they've done, the depth of what they've done to another human being, it grieves them as well, it breaks them. So it shows how it is possible, no matter what kind of evil a person had done, destructive act a person is engaged in the spur of that moment, when you take them through that dialogue process, a process of reconciliation, and you train them, you teach them, there is a breaking that goes inside them and a realization. Okay, so this is the first example. Another example, her house was burnt by this person who was standing next to her, and she was attacked. And that's what he says. I burnt her house. I attacked her in order to kill her and her children, but God protected them and they escaped. When I was released from jail, if I saw her, I would run and hide. See, they have to meet each other. So that's what happens after the polarization stage, right? They might go away from that community, but ultimately, if you are neighbors, you're going to see them every day. If you're in an institution, you're going to see the person on a daily basis in the class or in any other place. So I would run and hide. Then AMI started to provide us with trainings. I decided to ask her for forgiveness, to have good relationship with the person to whom you did evil deeds. We thank God. This is what he feels at the end. Then two more examples. This is again the woman. Sorry, this. Yeah. This is the one. Her husband and sons and daughters were killed. A very interesting way that they have captured this. One would not be thinking of sitting like this next to a person who killed everything, every member of the family, husband, sons, and daughters, all done by this man. I damaged and looted her property. I spent 9.5 years in jail. I had been educated to know good from evil. So further down, he says that it's not him, his father. Right? My own father was involved in killing her children. When I learned that my parents had behaved wickedly, for that I profoundly begged her pardon too. So this is not the actual perpetrator. He was involved in violent acts, but he did not kill. His father has killed. So this is an example of how we don't carry that hurt to the next generation. We carry that act of violence to the next generation because that will never stop. And this is the case in many villages. You have some villages, even in our Tamil Nadu, you have some villages where for generations there's enmity between two groups and they're constantly. Okay, and that is carried forward to their children who have clash in the schools because of this. The last example, now her children were killed, right? So this is a perpetrator standing next to her. When I was still in jail, President Kagame stated that prisoners who would plead guilty and ask pardon would be released. I was among the first ones to do this. Once I was outside, it was also necessary to ask pardon to the victim, Mother Mukubetra Cesaria, could not have known I was involved in the killings of her children, but I told her what happened. When she granted me pardon, all the things in my heart that made her look at me like a wicked man faded away. So this is a very difficult thing to do in terms of the survivors, to actually forgive. But what that forgiveness does in the life of the other person is to completely transform and change them. So this is the dialogue process that was there. The Hutus and Tutsis, that's the victims and perpetrators, were counseled over many months. So counseling is part of the dialogue process, and the perpetrator formally requests forgiveness. So the counseling takes place for many months, right? So again, it's not like this photographer had a brilliant idea. Let's make them stand together and take a picture. No, it doesn't work that way, right? So this artistic, photography as a work of art, it comes much later in the whole process. So the process begins with counseling them. And what's the first step? So the perpetrator goes to the house of the survivor and asks for forgiveness. And here, one point to be noted is if forgiveness is granted. So probably there are many people who were not able to. That's very human. So here are examples of those who were forgiven, those who forgave. So if forgiveness is granted, see, there is a ritual here. So they take a basket of offerings that is brought by the perpetrator along with the family, along with his friends. So the whole lot of people, they go to their house. So what do they give? Food, sorghum, or banana beer. So this is from their culture. And after presenting this, then the peace accord is settled with song and dance. That is a part where you have the whole process being completed. And that is where the creative arts approach or intervention plays a major role. So it doesn't stop with just the words, with just the counseling and with the language. For true healing to take place and to continue, for true restoration to take place, for forgiveness to take place, and for the inner healing, as a conscious to be healed, one has to go through these rituals. You will see from all over the world there are a lot of healing rituals. One has to find and revive those healing rituals which are there in the society. So to conclude, artistic expressions in some contexts, they become the only record of the event. You have a lot of other documentation. You have journalistic documentation, then you have reports that are written about that event, but you definitely need to have a lot of artistic representations of the event as well, because they would present it in a different way. You take statistics data, it will be full of numbers. You take journalistic information, it will be full of facts. And the government will talk about it in its own format. They have a report format, they give that information. So information and data alone that is documented as a record of history will serve no end at all, because we are ultimately human beings, right? We don't reduce ourselves to just statistical data. Therefore, artistic expression is the only thing that will capture all the deep emotions and hurts that people have gone through. So every community will have its ritual of forgiveness and reconciliation. Okay, so we need to identify that. You want to do a project, this is one interesting thing that you can work on, to go to different communities and find out, because what has happened now, a small example let me give you. You all know of that the ritual, the Valakap, which ritual we all are familiar with, right? What has that become now? People have started calling it as baby shower. And what is more focused on baby shower is photo shoot, right? In this age of Instagram and so on, people are more obsessed with the photo shoot part of any event that happens, be it the engagement or the marriage rituals and so on, the wedding rituals and so on. There are a lot of other rituals that are there, but more it's become digital, how you can present it in a very artistic way. But the actual rituals, if you change that name from Valagappa to a baby shower, you are completely changing the scope of the entire thing. Okay, Valagappa is associated with a lot of importance that's given to the woman, and only then she has the child. The baby part comes much later, but here she's the focus, and then you give her what is nutritious, what is important to her. So you don't create a diet plan and say this is what is important for this particular time of your life, but instead you have these rituals that she enjoys and goes through. Now, I'm not talking about the other things that, deep things that are going through. This is just an example that I'm giving of how when rituals change, not completely, even if the name changes, the scope of it, of what it was instituted, slightly alters. And I really firmly believe that every ritual has a deep inner healing process. So they should be rediscovered and revived. And rituals, they help where language fails. So when we talk about intercultural dialogue, we need to identify if there are two cultures which are in conflict and you want to get involved in the community or a volunteer in the community, the first thing that you can do in your immersive process is to go back in history, ask the elders of that community, do they have any of these old rituals and what do they exactly mean? And most of the rituals will have these beautiful songs and dance as a part of it. All right. So they bring back the joy of community celebration and communal harmony. This isn't there now, right? That's why when we talk about weddings and engagement and so on, it goes on for several days. You know, whatever the community or whatever background of the family, it used to go on for many days. Why? These are days where communities come together. You get a sense of identity, you get a sense of belonging to that particular place. And when we become fragmented as a society, we don't have time to take part in the month long celebrations, or even 2 days we can't stay because we are busy, we're all the time working and so on. So what has happened at the end? We keep running and running, and we don't find these things as important. The dance which is there, in different wedding ceremonies and celebration, these are the opportunities that we get where uh, we engage with that deeper part of our mind, which otherwise is actually controlling all our behaviors and getting more stressed because we have not given it any space to express itself. We don't have language for that because our language is more corporate. Right? Language is more of outcome based or delivery based or profit based, right? So, what happens to all that inner feelings or longings or desires or pain and everything that we are going through? These ritualistic spaces are spaces where we express it and we come to terms with it. That's why that gives us a lot of joy. So, creative interventions promote the arts approach, and arts approach will make learning process of culture of peace interesting and very relevant to this generation. So let me just conclude with this particular very nice song. Let me sing that for you. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, to faith in you. O Master, grant that I may never see so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, and to be loved as to love with all my soul. Make me a channel of your peace. So even this singing, okay, a ritual. Okay, when we engage in this, it's not just you're seeing something and your voice is beautiful and all of that, but it gives a contentment to your soul. That is how powerful the arts based approach is. That's how it makes dialogue always possible. So let's remember this, always dialogue is always possible. And thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you, ma'am, for the enlightening and informative presentation on how peace and conflict are perceived by various groups and cultures of people. And also thank you for that beautiful rendition of Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. Thank you. The floor is now open to discussion and questions.
Thank you, ma'am, for that lovely, what do you call, simplified, but at the same time powerful way of presenting that dialogue is possible. Right. Most of the time, we are only targeting the, the aggressive nature in us. We never come down to sit and talk. So we tell the world would certainly be a much better place and there wouldn't be all of these if only we sit down for the dialogue. Thank you for having made that really well because I mean Alice Boulding's I mean very little of hers I've read to know what this was about. I was really interested in this. What is that? The all these little things they do, especially tribal communities. to when they come together, the rituals. We too have, but our rituals, I think most of us in the mainstream communities, our rituals are meant only for, to foster aggressiveness instead of, see, we just trigger the wrong things. But this is right what tribal communities still do, and they continue to do. I mean, that is so that you highlighted. I think that is the solution for the world today. I think that was the earliest that was there, and it still will continue only if we. So, thank you for that really enlightening. Yeah, I think you've covered almost everything, but you brought it down to our students' level. That's right. No, it's always the simple things that are. I mean, when you say it simply, it is most effective. Thank you. Your presentation was that today.
Powerful presentation, Phoebe. Thank you.
Very.
Phoebe, I just have a question in terms of wanting to understand. See, when we, especially Sri Lanka ma'am also will be aware, like, we in University of Madras, we used to have these diplomats coming and talking. They would say, so this kind of people to people thing is good. Governments, we will do what we are doing at our level. Having all the cultural programs, the artistic thing, whether you have drama, you have, suppose we have a play on Sri Lankan Tamils, or you have a they encourage the artistic thing, and they call, okay, that is dialogue. Okay, that is also part of dialogue, but dialogue between nations at the official level, has peace building, peace studies got something to do with that. Um, People to people thing is what community and groups do, and whatever you have explained now is the people to people relationship. All right. So what are the strategies, or what is dialoguing in peace building at the um, level of statesmanship, at the level of statesmen and nations? How does this kind of thing work, or or is this also a part of what they do?
Ma'am, at that level, you have organizations like the UNO, and every country will have their peace building organization at the official level. They usually connect with an NGO, with any NGO that has been working with those communities. So in any case, it should be a bottom-up approach. So even in Manipur, for example, they had worked with an NGO there, and the government official will coordinate with the NGOs. So when there is a dialogue, for example, there is a place where they all meet along with the community leaders. So and the other major stakeholders at the higher level of their hierarchy, they all come together for their conversation. So that is where it would begin. But the background of all of this is the community and the ideas that they've already communicated with the NGO. So there is already some work that is done, and then they would come together in have different. They meet during different times. They have the first meeting, and then afterwards, the two parties will tell what they want, and the other party might say, no, we can agree to this. We will agree to the other things, and so on. Then they go back to the community. They share it with their communities. Then they would come back for another meeting. So the meeting would take place at different levels until they finally reach a conclusion. So at every higher level, this is how dialogue is done. And the cultural part of it, that is mostly within the community. Or otherwise, it will, if it is like a program, it will only be like a performance. Some people perform and and they watch. So it will be an exposure or awareness of another party about their community. That's at the higher level. But at the level of the community engagement, like I was telling you, there are already rituals which they have. So they just engage with those rituals and continue to build the community. Tribals in the same society, they have common rituals. In every tribal society, you will find that they have these rituals which are common among both. So they use or perform these rituals when it comes to healing and reconciliation.
We
I also want to, you know, sometimes I'm just being, uh, critiquing. Okay, so sometimes it's peace. All that we speak about peace sounds prescriptive, you know, um, and in the wronged first group wants justice. So, do you sacrifice justice for peace? And now you remember that Jessica Lal murder, especially instances of rape, rape
Yes,
where
yes.
the victim has, yeah, there has to be justice. So then, in this case, would there be any question of forgiveness, right? So, because some places punishment should be such that uh, this should not happen again. That's the signal to
Yes,
be
yes,
sent. Yes.
yes.
So, what would your views be on?
Yes, ma'am. So when we talk about peace, as you said, it's not like anything can happen, but I will forgive the person and go on. As a human, we can't do that. We can't be like that. So there's always something where, as I said, ma'am, peace is something that we move towards. It is not an end in itself. So conflict will always be there. So the moment there is forgiveness, also there is conflict, and peace and justice always should go together. Only then it will be sustained. So if, like you said, if what you said is applicable, for example, where the power structure is not balanced, right? For example, if the perpetrator belongs to a very powerful community and he is raped, and then we talk about peace, and then she forgives, he is getting away with what he has done. So based on that particular context, one has to apply principles of justice as well. That is very essential for peace, for peace building. And in addition to that, when we move on as a community, for example, if that perpetrator is from the own family, how do we move on from that point? So that is why we try to build a dialogue so that that hurt, that wound is not carried or transferred to the other people and affects the other communities. Because, like I said, there's a village in Tamil Nadu where, because of some incident that had happened in the past, till today they are fighting. Those two communities continue to fight. So, somewhere it has to stop. That's the scope of peace. So there will always be conflict. That will be our understanding. Now, within this conflict, how do we work through with different communities while we give a balance when it comes to peace, as well as address all the issues where they have been wronged? That is important, ma'am. That's a part of peace building process. Okay.
Yes, for the clarification.
since there is no authority to push this piece down at the international level, as Bolding, she says, no, the premature, what do you call, we've had this universalism even before, like our UDHR and all that. It still is in practice, but I mean, it is still there at the UN level, and it's a rule, but it is not being enforced, in many situations. So the trouble that world statesmen find to enforce this kind of that, I think, is a perennial one. I don't know how they would resolve that. I think that is what Preeti was also, I mean, Maria Preeti was also trying to tell. This problem is there. Maybe they have recognized it at the theory level,
Hmm.
but in practice, it is very, very difficult. And tribe, I mean, if it's communities that are like tribals, they don't allow outsiders in. Even few NGOs only can go in
Yes, yes.
and and talk with these. So that's why we keep telling that the UN has failed I mean, anything we keep telling. You know, even as a youngster, when I wrote, I said UN has failed to keep peace. That's how I wrote in one of my essays. Right? I still remember that, and how difficult it is as an older person. We understand, but for that, do we have any? I mean, which even the what is the UN cannot, what do you call, Justice Forum cannot push anything. No, it
Yes.
doesn't work.
Mm, Probably what I think can happen is the bottom up approach, ma'am, when it comes to peace building. So instead of going from the UN trying to, that would take a lot of time, and there's a lot of politics involved. A lot of major players are involved in that. Sometimes it's business conflict creates a lot of business. There are many people profiting from that. So when you go from the bottom up approach, you will find that every community will already have their own individual uh, or distinct rituals that they follow, their own method, their own tools that they can use for this. So that has to be identified. The mistake that probably for years people are doing is to have one model approach. So one thing works for every community. We talk about peace, it's same for everyone. We talk about justice, it's same for everyone. So when we try to apply the same solution to all communities, then there is no solution. That will affect till the top level. So that can probably be thought of to look at it from the individual culture's perspective to find out how a solution can be brought. This so bottom up approach will work slowly but effectively.
Everyone should listen to this. No, otherwise they say it was done like that there. Then why not? It's applicable to them. Why it
That's
should it
a
not be
mistake.
applicable? That's a mistake we're
Yes.
all making. Yes. Reservation, everything. I think everything comes with that. We don't allow all of these things that we want universal, universality in everything.
Yes, yes, yes.
Can we move on and with the philosophy side? We've had such a lovely session, Cindy. Thank you. We
Thank you.
really did
Nolan
not.
doesn't have anything. I mean, your student research group doesn't have any doubts. They're the youngsters must be the ones who should be coming up with questions.
Yes.
No?
Yes, Nolan. So carry on.
We have now come to the end of today's session. I thank all the intending board members, Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan, Head of the Department of English, Queen Mary's College, Dr. Srilata, retired Head of the Department of English, Chelamal Women's College, faculty members, scholars, and students who have participated in today's session. I also thank our keynote speaker for the day, Dr. Phoebe Andis. The next fortnightly symposium will be held on the 23rd of August 2024 on the topic Post-Holocaust Peace Dialogue. Thank you all once again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
was a wonderful session, comprehensive,
Yes.
very soulful. That's the way you always do your work.
Thank you. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Shilita ma'am.
Please
Thank you.
come to
Thank you so much. Yeah.
yeah, come to Queen Mary's TV and give a talk on peace studies,
Definitely, definitely.
Mm.
I will.
or we can bring our students to MCC.
Mhm.
Let's look forward to working
Sure,
together.
definitely, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
And
Thank
one
you.
doubt, Preeti,
Yeah.
just do you send this schedule of to all colleges?
You're
Your
feel free
research,
to send. Yeah, share it with whomever you
because
want.
many people don't know. I know they might like
Uh,
to.
yes,
I can
please
send it to.
send to all your contacts. Send to
Okay.
all your contacts.
Uh,
There's one thing where they have to say who has recommended them. They can give your name
okay. Right.
because we don't want people to just go into circulation and anyone at random signing up for a keynote, especially a
Okay.
paper.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
right. Right. No,
December
otherwise
last
paper
year.
presentations. Yes.
Yeah, whatever it is, let them come with a recommendation. But the form requires a recommendation.
Okay.
But it can be in circulation.
Okay.
Some kind of screening of who's presenting, no?
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's the
Yeah.
schedule is as you have sent me earlier.
Schedule is as I sent, and the
Yes.
same thing has the form also in the QR code.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
You
you,
all.
Jayasudha. Jayasudha from your college is regular TV.
Oh,
Your MSc
Jay
is all out.
Hi, Jay Sudha.
Hi,
She's
ma'am.
here, huh? Hi, Jay Sudha. I hope you know. Can
Actually,
you
Phoebe.
remember?
Yes,
You
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes. Good read.
Actually, Phoebe, ma'am, was my guide, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. See you. Have a nice weekend.
See you all.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.